residents, things like that. So the current poverty rate, I mean, it has increased over time, right?
Yeah.
So how do you currently feel about where the poverty rate is at now?
So obviously the levels of poverty, right, are like I think, for instance, in communities like Pilsen or the areas that are rapidly gentrifying, right? I think there's this false notion that things got better, right? And things never got better. I think what was happening is we got a rapid displacement of people, right? If you look at the economy as a whole, right, you don't look at a space in isolation. You look at the whole economy. So we still continue to have high levels of violence, high levels of poverty. So poverty hasn't improved, even though the wealth of the economy. I mean, we see how many mega developments we have in the city, but how much of that mega development is actually going to help the residents of the city? How much of those mega developments is creating affordable housing, is creating local jobs, and a lot of these mega developments get a lot of public subsidies without public accountability, and thus not enough public benefits, right? And I think the city has a horrible track record with that. So obviously there's still, we have high levels of poverty, high levels of violence, that and the way to address them is with the structural changes. We need to make sure that our resources go, public incentives to make sure that we strengthen our economy, and we need to make sure that we really make sure that our local economy residents are benefiting when the opportunities arise. Otherwise, we will continue to see a large amount of people who live in the city for lack of opportunities. 250,000 people in the last count.
And speaking of displaced families, have you personally talked to them about just how they feel about Pilsen in general, from being back in the day mostly a very Mexican culture, as opposed to now it's changing, that some may feel like the culture is sort of fading away?
Yeah, of course. I mean, today we just had a long-term resident who came, and she was really saddened that she may have to move next year, and we're not creating obviously enough affordable housing or preserving the identity and the social fabric of the community. Obviously, you see communities like Pilsen or Chinatown, nationwide being recognized for their social fabric, their thriving, strong identity, with a strong identity and a sense of community. But that's exactly what we're losing, where we're not protecting or preserving that social fabric. So for us, conscious development is very important. Yes, of course, development is important, but not at the expense of the very people who make these communities, so unique, so well known across the city, across the country. So one of the things that we obviously want to make sure we push, and we really strongly believe that we can have conscious development where we can create a balance between preserving the identity of the community, creating affordable housing, making sure that our residents, long-term residents, don't get suffocated with taxes, property taxes, where the developers get subsidies for the same taxes, that they don't get TIF dollars. These developers get TIF subsidies, while residents don't even have their sidewalks fixed, right? But when development comes, then all the changes come. So we have a tale of two cities, and also a lot of inequality, and also still corruption, right? That doesn't allow to us to have checks and balances, so that we help those families who've been here for a long time, those who still struggling. Not too long ago, I had a family who was being targeted by inspections and violations. Still, they were working hard, a hard-working, working-class family, making sure they got a $30,000 loan because they're committed to being in the community. They're working hard, they're trying to pay off their property taxes, working hard as a family, paying their debt. They just got hit with another $8,000 in violations. This is not normal. Of course, there's something going on here, and the system allows these kind of things to happen. So we're determined to have obviously more checks and balances, make sure that, yes, we need to make sure the building's up to code, but we cannot be harassing our families. We make sure that long-term families, long-term residents also have a place in the community. Obviously, we need investment. We obviously welcome the new residents. It's about having a balanced and conscious development that I think everybody agrees is possible and necessary.
How do you feel about organizations or companies like the Property Markets Group that say they want to create affordable housing on 18th and Peoria, I believe, where they have big space? It seems like they want to make luxury housing units. How do you feel as opposed to companies wanting to do that as opposed to trying to create an affordable housing for its long-term residents.
Well, I mean, if you look for, you look at their actions, right? The track record, right? Is a luxury development from New York, developer from New York. They have the same plan, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. They're under litigation right now with the city because my predecessor, and with all the obviously the scandals and the real unfortunate and shameful situation that he put us in, even at that point, there was a change in zoning to prevent this developer to develop the 500 luxury units because of community pressure, right? We got to remember those lots should not have been sold the way they got sold because the Jesuits owned that, or used to own those lots. That's what we continue to fight for sites like San Adelbert here, churches that, so they didn't turn into condos, so that we can have this discussion, at least having the options available to residents, and affordable housing is one of those options, and is welcomed by the community. Why not? So with the PMG, a developer that not only has failed to listen to the needs of the residents, I think the city, under the previous administration, spent over $180,000, to create a layout and a blueprint of what is needed by the community. Have dismissed that. If anything, they tried to jump the gun, cut corners, try to introduce an ordinance behind, people's back. So a proposal, I mean. So unfortunately, that's not the way we will get to conscious development. Conscious development requires processes and discussions and dialogue so that the residents decide on the projects that they want to see in their communities. And I think the community, and here in the community, not only across the 25th ward, they have concerns not only about affordable housing, but green space and a quality of life that I think that we all want to enjoy.
How would you explain gentrification to someone? Let me ask you this first. And how do you feel about gentrification as a whole, like the process of it, what it does to a community? Let's say gentrification happened to somewhere like back of the yards, for example.
Yeah. So again, the gentrification is such a broad term, right? And gentrification is usually a term that mistakenly, right, has these connotations of, okay, well, gentrification needs to happen and so on. Well, gentrification is a process, right? It's a process, and it's obviously must be explained in terms of displacement, right? Of the cost that it has on the long-term residents, right? 10,000 residents being displaced in Pilsen in the last 10 years. Logan Square, I think the last number is 20,000 residents displaced. So I think that the gentrification process, is a phenomenon across the world, global, national trends. And I think that what we haven't been able to address is the sense of community that the people have. So we cannot talk about gentrification, we talk about community, right? When we talk about saying, well, obviously the conversation was that things have gotten better, right? Well, again, when we talk about poverty, we talk about the issues that we talked earlier on, right? We look at the economy as a whole. Has things have gotten better? Has violence have been addressed? Has schools been improved? I mean, let's look at the economy as a whole, right? Because if we're pushing violence aside and it's getting worse in somewhere else, we need to look at the whole picture and really analyze the things that we did gotten better. So, if we talk to people who've been displaced, things have not gotten better because now they're facing the same issues somewhere else. So things will get better when we have an economy that addresses inequality, income inequality, lack of access to affordable housing, lack of access to basic services, and creates accountability and transparency to make sure that the development is obviously thinking as conscious development, so local residents also see the benefits of the changes. But when residents don't see those benefits, I do think that we have an issue.
Are there any future plans or future proposals for Pilsen to build affordable housing units in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we just approved 37 affordable housing units in a project here close in 19th and Racine. Obviously, we have plans where we discuss sites that represent opportunities. That that can become more affordable housing. So of course, I mean, we have the 78, a huge mega project that got $1.3 billion in subsidies. So that would have a large effect in communities like Pilsen, like Chinatown, like Alderman Homes. So what are the safety nets? So that's the demand. Obviously, we're, under our administration, we want to have a bold plan of affordable housing where we can acquire land to develop affordable housing, where we preserve affordable housing so we get subsidies for the long-term homeowners, for the small homeowners, new residents and long-term residents alike, who want to maintain affordable rents. They like their neighbors. They want to maintain the identity of the community, the strong sense of community that we have. So we need to be creative on how we have this conscious development that is possible. And I think definitely we do have plans that obviously we're presenting for the current administration to be considered and executed more than anything else, so that we we can protect and have unique neighborhoods like Chinatown and Pilsen to continue to thrive in its own way.
Well, how do you feel about these some long-term residents that sort of lost faith in whether it's Chicago politicians or city officials in general? How do you feel like some of them lost faith in being able to kind of help them or bring somewhere like Pilsen, like with like losing, how a lot of residents are losing their homes, things like that. How do you feel about those residents, or what would your message be to those residents that feel like they're just left out?
Well, so when you have the climate that we have, right? Terrible administration, spreading hate and corruption all over the place. Not also national, local. We have cases of indictments of politicians. So of course, like people will feel let down and betrayed, and of course it's hard to believe. So I can only tell you what I see, and I think that we see the same thing. That there's a system that has failed us all, but we do need representation. Despite the climates and the attacks, I can tell you that for a community like in the 25th ward, to elect someone like me, who's an immigrant, who came here to 17 years old, who came here. I don't have my family here. Came as many people in Pilsen, or Chinatown, or many other immigrant communities who come here, and across the city, you see similar stories. That come to city that is oftentimes a new start for many of us, and to be able to be elected in a wonderful community like the 25th Ward, from West Loop to Alderman Homes, to Chinatown, to Pilsen, to McKinley, to UIC, and for people to believe that it's possible, I think that give us hope that our message about battling corruption, our message that putting legislation in place, what we've done is, first, months in office, pass ethics reform to prevent aldermen to being lobbyists, to make sure there's more checks and balances in government, to lead by example, to stop the practice of pay to play, where developers pay their way into communities. I don't accept money from big developers. We want to make sure that our example, or actions speak louder than words. And I think we have a responsibility to restore the trust in our institutions, because there is right-wing cults that are, and right-wing narratives that are there to dismantle government. And we have that in the current administration. We have heads of departments that don't believe in their very mission. We have heads of the Department of the EPA who want to dismantle the EPA. The heads of the Chicago Housing Authority, the Chicago House, the Housing Authority that are that don't believe in affordable housing. So they want to dismantle the very mission of institutions. So it's urgent that we get involved. It's urgent that we get better representation. The answer is not to dismantle government. The answer is not less regulation. That's what we have in office right now. Deregulation and corruption at the highest level. So we need to make sure that we have better representation locally at every state of government, so we have a government that is responsive to the people. We need to get big money out of politics, yes. We need to get corruption out of politics, as we need to have, obviously, people who are unapologetically speaking about the atrocities committed against children, separation of families, people who are talking about income inequality, that talk about climate change. We need people, representatives speaking the truth. And as long as we have those representatives in office, people will see changes and will restore the trust in our government.
What are you looking most forward to for this coming year, 2020? Do you have any goals or plans for Pilsen or just the 25th Ward in general?
Yeah, we have some plans that we want to pass ordinances. We just passed an ordinance to stop the harassment of realtors and developers, against homeowners. So we passed a first legislation. We want to continue to push for more affordable housing projects. We want to make sure that big development doesn't go without checks and balances, that we create safety nets for our homeowners, long-term homeowners. So we want to make sure that TIF reform is a reality. So public dollars help us for the public good and not to subsidize the corporations and the big developers who are already profiting from us. So we want to pass legislation to help us have a government for the many, a government for the majority of Chicagoans, so that we look at decisions that benefits the working people. We want to make sure that we help the homeowner with the property taxes. I know that we have a broken property tax system. We want to get at the core of that. We want to get at the core of the thousands of evictions that are happening, every week in the city of Chicago, so that we start thinking about, potentially ordinance to have just cause to evict, so people don't get like in developers who give you a 30-day notice and then you're out in the cold. We've seen seniors I've seen come to the office, trying almost being evicted, in the middle of the winter. 72-year-old senior came in last time by a big developer. So we're going to hold them accountable. We're going to pass legislation to make sure that we have more just laws and a government that continues to represent the best interests of all of us.
All right, well, Alderman, thank you so much.